Top story this week, peace in our time. Donald Trump has announced that he will negotiate a peace between Russia and Russia, bringing an end to the war in Ukraine. The details and logistics still remain to be hammered out. They have insisted, or Trump and Russia, that Ukraine will be involved in the negotiations. It does appear at this stage that Ukraine will be involved in the negotiations in the same way that a French goose is involved in the annual French foie gras of the year competition. But, it's exciting times for fans of giving in to the demands of despots and dictators, Josh. And, at last America has a president who's prepared to set aside the hackneyed old "we will not give in to terrorists and dictators" shtick that I think has held you back as a nation for far too long.
That's right. It's time to start capitulating. That's what 2025 is all about. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is being solved by a bilateral bro-out between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. They allegedly were on the phone for 90 minutes hashing out details of but I imagine most of that call was you hang up first. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. Just being besties. It doesn't seem good, right? With the Ukraine, it feels like we're really selling out Ukraine, and it is also a little bit of a red flag that the United States is sending Marco Rubio to negotiate these peace talks, a politician who couldn't negotiate peace between Florida and Florida while he was an official there, and that they're doing it in Saudi Arabia, aka the fairness capital of the world.
Strange times. Trump is, of course, no stranger to being accused of channeling various 1930s political leaders. It's just Neville Chamberlain is a new one. And at least Chamberlain, I think, had good intentions. But fair play to Trump for broadening his repertoire. Still waiting for him to do Gandhi, which could go very badly wrong. And also, ironically, still waiting for him to have even a partial go at American President Franklin D. Roosevelt. But anyway, he's getting on the 30s bandwagon. I have in my hand a tiny piece of paper. It's a beautiful piece of paper, the best piece of paper in the world. There's no doubt Trump would have said to himself when he was practicing. Alice, a lot of people have said this, it's basically Trump has essentially legalized crime in America with his presidential pardons and the sort of justification of the January the 6th insurrection. He's essentially now legalizing war crimes as well. You trained as a lawyer for many years, but obviously you saw the way the wind was blowing in the world. You jumped the law ship. You must be absolutely delighted with your career choice.
Well, Andy, you are so right. I did indeed spend 7 years of my life studying law and then practicing law. And I remember thinking, well, this can't last. Hundreds of years of painstakingly accumulated rules, formalizing our intuitive sense of interpersonal fairness so that it can be applied outwards in the context of large and complex institutions, counterbalancing as far as reasonably possible the biases and corruptions of individuals within those systems, and grindingly correcting slow errors as applied by people of varying moral character. I thought, chuck it! Boring! A world governed by laws is a world for women and the weak, Andy. Let's go back to a world where my only job is to pick a man strong enough to hit my enemies, but kind enough only to hit me when he thinks it's going to be educational. But also, I would like to make a note, if the world is going to descend into Hobbesian chaos, I'd like it to happen quickly while I've still got these childbearing hips to bring to market. 3 to 5 years in the tank on the baby-making front, so chop chop.
It's also tough, right? Emmanuel Macron called a meeting of European heads of state to figure out how they're going to deal with this situation. And if there's one thing I've learned from talking on this podcast with people from the UK, when you turn against all of Europe, things don't usually go your way. Keir Starmer, right, has vowed to keep the United States and Europe from drifting apart, which I think is a noble goal, but I doubt it, because adding a third so rarely helps keep a relationship together. It's just going to make things really weird to explain to Australia at parties before the inevitable separation.
Well, J.D. Vance has been taking these swings at Europe, saying they've abandoned the fundamental Western value of letting everyone scream obscenities into each other's mouths as loudly as they possibly can. which, is what held Europe up in the past. I don't know. I think every nation is going to have to reckon in its own way with these like impossible problems that are caused by, the pincer movement of climate wars ruining the place you live and the information superhighway fire hosing everyone who's even got one single eyeball or earball with a thunder funnel of hyper-condensed rage juice. But I don't know if that's the way.
Yeah. I mean, J.D. Vance lecturing Europe on free speech and democracy. So let me just check what story we're doing here. Was it J.D. Vance accusing Europe of not upholding free speech, or the White House banning Associated Press journalists from the Oval Office because they used the term Gulf of Mexico instead of the Trumply imposed Gulf of America? I forget which free speech story we would do. I think it was the Vance one.
Are we doing Elon Musk bringing back free speech to Twitter, or are we doing Elon Musk shadow banning people who say mean things about him? Which one of those ones is it?
Or actively redacting government websites?
Well, look, I mean, J.D. Vance obviously is well known as an AI-generated temple of smuggery, rancor, and freestyle nonsensicalism. But I'd love to point out all the different ways in which this is rampagingly hypocritical. This is coming from a country which I was also reading on The Guardian. They've banned a kid's book by the actor Julianne Moore about a kid with freckles. Has been banned from some schools as part of the so-called compliance review to stop children reading about freckles, I think. Also,
they don't even want kids to know about people with a little melanin in their skin. Never mind Black history. They're out on freckles. That's bad. In February? That's Black History Month. That's cold.
But anyway, obviously, we in Europe, we need to learn from the American commitment to freedom of speech and from freedom of children's book reading.
I mean, just J.D. Vance is saying a lot about, like, very confidently about the history of Europe and the ways in which Europe is failing its own history. Josh, I don't know anything about the American education system, and I'm not going to ask, but I'm going to tell you something about the American education system, which is that it seems to reward people who say things with confidence that sound vaguely plausible, even when the things they say are very easily disprovable by literally any further reading on the subject, like even the second half of the sentence they're quoting. That seems like what would happen if Dunning Kruger and then they had a baby. And you know what they say about the Dunning-Kruger effect? I don't, which makes me an expert. They say the less you know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, the more you know about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that's fundamentally the same joke formulated slightly differently, but I like them both, so we're leaving them in.
This is the Bugle. We've been doing that for nearly 18 years, to be honest.
It is like, you guys are focusing on the negatives, right? J.D. Vance went to the Munich Security Conference, which is the Coachella for Secretaries of State, and he took shots at Europe, right? Saying the continent is being undermined by enemies within, which with this launch of a racially charged, internationally directed diatribe, finally, white Christian nationalists have their own version of Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. So this is huge. This is big. After the Grammys and the Super Bowl, they needed a win. The security conference was supposed to be, this was what they were supposed to be there discussing European nations boosting defense spending and how to end the conflict in Ukraine without giving into Russia, which, whoops. But Vance kind of made it all about himself, which is the most American thing he could have done, especially when you consider he did it by speaking English while in a European country. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz decried Vance's statement as the U.S. perpetrating outsider meddling in another region's politics, to which the people of Nicaragua and Syria replied, "Come on, dude, this is nothing." They said it in unison. It was crazy.
Look, I mean, like I say, I'd love to point out all the ways in which Vance was, as I say, rampagingly hypocritical, but I can't. I can't point out all the ways for various reasons. One, although we have some flexibility in how long this show is, our audience research of Bugle listeners suggests that you do generally prefer a podcast that is less than 700 hours long. Reason two, I'm bored of looking at my pet globe every morning, cuddling it whilst we both weep and whimpering, "What happened to you?" Three, I'm from Europe. I don't have any freedom of speech. I have no outlet for saying what I want to say. Oh, maybe he's onto something. 4, we have to respect the mandate that the Trump Vance cartel has. They were democratically elected by the people of America on an explicit, clearly stated platform of rampaging hypocrisy. They were democratically elected by the people of America to impose that rampaging hypocrisy on not just America itself, but also the rest of the world. And if we in the rest of the world had not wanted them to do this, then we should have taken the time and effort to become uncontrollable gazillionaire techtrepreneurs and bought ourselves control of American politics just like Elon Musk did. That option was open to us, and we were too lazy to take it. Another reason that I can't point out all the hypocrisies is that, well, if free speech results in J.D. Vance, maybe we're better off without it. And also because maybe in Europe we labour with this historically resonant sense that free speech carries an element of risk with it and a contract of responsibility, because we've seen how it can metastasize into regimes which rise to power, aided by that freedom of speech, which then crush and stifle it to further their own ends. But America might be less attuned to that risk because it's earlier on in the process. It's going through that process right now, so it doesn't have quite the perspective that we have it as an older, more experienced continent on the way down.